Hey guys, tonight we find ourselves not tucked snugly in our modern beds, but waking up in ancient Rome. Imagine the scent of wood smoke and something less pleasant wafting in from the street below. The sun, already blazing, beats down on your tile roof, promising another sweltering day. The sounds of hawkers shouting their wares, the rumble of carts, and the ever-present murmur of the Forum are already seeping into your sleep-addled brain. You feel the grit of sand between your teeth, probably shouldn't have left that window open last night. Getting by in Rome, well, let's just say you probably won't survive this if you keep your modern sensibilities. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you down in the comments. I'm always curious where in the world these stories find you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You groan and roll over on your straw-filled mattress. Ah, the luxurious accommodations of a, well, let's just say you're not living in a villa. This is more of an insula, a Roman apartment building. Think of it as ancient public housing, but with more potential for spontaneous combustion. You peel yourself off the surprisingly itchy wool blanket and swing your legs over the side of the bed, careful not to step on the, well, let's not think about what's under there. The first order of business is dealing with the morning chill. You shiver slightly, despite the already rising temperature. Rome wasn't all sunshine and togas, you know. Winters could be surprisingly brutal, and heating wasn't exactly sophisticated. You quickly don your tunica, a simple woolen garment that serves as your basic daily wear. Not exactly fashion-forward, but practical. Now, where did you leave that sandal? Finding it under a pile of discarded scrolls, probably some bad poetry you tried to write last night, you slap it on and head towards the impluvium, the shallow pool in the center of your apartment, designed to collect rainwater. A quick splash of refreshingly cold water to the face is enough to jolt you awake. Time to face the day. Historians still argue whether most Romans bathed daily. Public bathhouses, the thermae, were certainly popular and played a vital role in Roman society, but that's not how everyone started their morning. Still, the wealthy could afford their own private baths, with slaves to heat the water and provide all manner of scented oils and pumice stones. You? Well, you're hoping there's enough water left in the impluvium for a decent scrub. You use a small terracotta oil lamp that is a little wobbly to illuminate your space. The smell of stale wine and something vaguely cheesy fills the air. Ah, breakfast. You grab a piece of panis quadratus, a dense, round loaf of bread that's been sitting out all night. It's probably stale, but you're not complaining. Food was a precious commodity in ancient Rome, especially for the less fortunate. You dunk it in some watered-down wine, hey, gotta start the day off right, and choke it down. Time to head out into the city. You brace yourself as you open your front door, a flimsy wooden affair that probably wouldn't stop a determined house cat. The hallway is dark and narrow, and you have to navigate a gauntlet of overflowing chamber pots and gossiping neighbors. You mutter a quick *salve* as you pass, trying to avoid eye contact. Rome was a city of contrasts. Magnificent temples and grand public buildings stood alongside squalid slums and crowded tenements. The sheer scale of the place is overwhelming, even by modern standards. The population of Rome during its peak is estimated to have been over 1 million people. Imagine the traffic. You navigate the crowded streets, dodging chariots, vendors, and stray dogs. The air is thick with the smell of spices, sewage, and livestock. You swear you just stepped in something unpleasant. Watch where you're going. You are on your way to the Forum, the heart of Roman political and social life. It's a bustling marketplace where you can buy anything from imported silks to exotic animals, listen to fiery orators, and maybe even catch a glimpse of the emperor himself. Though, hopefully, from a safe distance. It's also a great place to pick up rumors and gossip, which, you admit, is one of your favorite pastimes. Finding a relatively clean spot on a set of steps, you settle in to watch the day unfold. Politicians are giving speeches, mostly bragging about themselves, merchants are hawking their wares, mostly exaggerating their quality, and philosophers are arguing about the meaning of life, mostly confusing everyone. It's all quite entertaining, really. Now, the Romans were known for their love of spectacles. Gladiatorial combats, chariot races, and public executions were all popular forms of entertainment. You're not sure you have the stomach for all that blood and gore, but the chariot races at the Circus Maximus are undeniably thrilling. The roar of the crowd, the thunder of the horses' hooves, the near-death experience of the drivers, it's an adrenaline rush like no other. You hear two people discussing an impending trial. Roman law was surprisingly complex, with a system of courts, lawyers, and juries. Of course, justice wasn't always blind. Wealth and influence could often sway the outcome of a case. But, hey, at least they had a legal system, right? Suddenly, you realize you're starving. All this people watching has worked up an appetite. You head towards a nearby Thermopolium, a Roman fast food joint. It's basically a counter with a bunch of holes filled with hot food. You order a bowl of pulse, a thick porridge made from grains and vegetables. It's not exactly gourmet cuisine, but it's cheap and filling. As you eat, you notice a group of soldiers marching past. The Roman army was the backbone of the empire, a highly disciplined and well-trained fighting force. Their conquests brought wealth and power to Rome, but also endless war and bloodshed. Historians still debate whether the Roman Empire fell due to internal decay or external pressure. The truth, as always, is probably a combination of both. After lunch, you decide to visit the Temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, one of the most important religious sites in Rome. It's a massive structure, towering over the city. You offer a small prayer to Jupiter, hoping for good fortune. The Roman religion was a complex mix of mythology, ritual, and superstition. People prayed to different gods for different things, hoping to appease the divine powers and ensure their safety and prosperity. They would offer small animal sacrifices. You notice one particularly well-dressed citizen in a toga. The toga, the distinctive garment of Roman citizens, was a symbol of status and privilege. Only Roman citizens were allowed to wear it, and it was considered quite an honor. Togas were notoriously difficult to put on and required the assistance of a slave or two. You're pretty sure you'd trip and fall flat on your face if you tried to wear one. Your stomach starts to rumble again. It's getting late. You head back towards your insula, the sounds of the city slowly fading as darkness falls. You pass a taberna, a Roman tavern, and the sounds of raucous laughter and clinking glasses spill out into the street. You briefly consider stopping for a drink, but decide against it. You have to be up early tomorrow. Plus, you're pretty sure you're already pushing your luck with that impluvium water usage. Back in your apartment, you light a lamp and settle in for the night. You try to read a scroll, but your eyes are too tired. You blow out the lamp and lie down on your straw-filled mattress. The sounds of the city slowly lull you to sleep. You dream of gladiators, emperors, and, well, probably chamber pots. Just another day in ancient Rome. Okay, settle in, friend. Let's talk about mornings. Or, that time before the day really kicks you in the teeth. You trudge toward the kitchen, eyes squinting against the injustice of the dawn. The first thought? Coffee. Always coffee. Unless, of course, you're one of those people. The tea-sipping, yoga-doing, sunshine-loving early birds. If so, congratulations, and also, respectfully, get out. Just kidding, mostly. But seriously, what is your secret? Anyway, you need coffee. Black as your soul, preferably. Or maybe you're a latte person. That's okay too. No judgment here. We all cope in our own caffeine-fueled way. You rummage in the cupboard, locate the magical beans, or pre-ground disappointment, depending on your level of pre-morning functioning, and wrestle with the coffee maker. It gurgles, spits, and generally acts like a grumpy old man who hasn't had his coffee yet. While that liquid gold brews, you consider breakfast. Cereal? Toast? A hastily grabbed banana? You're not exactly a morning person, so culinary creativity is usually limited. Although, you do vaguely recall seeing a recipe online for avocado toast with everything bagel seasoning. Ambitious. Perhaps for a weekend. Today, survival is the name of the game. You finally have your coffee. The first sip is pure bliss. A wave of warmth spreads through you, thawing the pre-dawn chill. You close your eyes for a moment, savoring the flavor, the aroma, the blessed caffeine. Did you know that coffee wasn't always so readily available? It's said that in 17th century Mecca, coffee houses were actually banned for a time because they were seen as places where people gathered to discuss politics and, gasp, criticize the government. Can you imagine a world without readily available caffeine to fuel our revolutionary thoughts? The horror. Now, about breakfast. Historians still argue whether the concept of breakfast as a distinct meal even existed for many people throughout history. For centuries, most folks just ate whatever leftovers were available. Fancy a bit of stew from yesterday for breakfast? Or perhaps some bread and cheese? That was the height of culinary sophistication. Only later did specialized morning foods really take hold. Speaking of historical diets, did you know that in ancient Rome, some people believed that eating dormice, yes, those adorable little rodents, was a delicacy? They fattened them up in special clay pots and then, well, you get the picture. Suddenly, your cereal doesn't seem so bad, does it? With coffee in hand and a semi-acceptable breakfast consumed, you brave the next challenge, the wardrobe. You stare into the abyss of your closet. Clothes spill out, a chaotic jumble of colors, fabrics, and past fashion regrets. It's like an archaeological dig into the various phases of your life, the edgy phase, the preppy phase, the I'm going to live in sweatpants phase. What to wear today? That depends on the day's mission. A soul-crushing office job? A casual hangout with friends? Or, if you're really lucky, a day spent curled up on the couch with a good book? If it's the latter, I salute you. Wear your comfiest pajamas with pride. But assuming you need to leave the house, you begin the agonizing process of selection. The existential dread of, does this outfit even look good on me, washes over you. You try on 3 different shirts, each one making you feel vaguely wrong. Finally, you settle on something that's at least presentable. Jeans, a t-shirt, maybe a sweater if it's chilly. You're not trying to win any fashion awards, just trying to blend in and avoid any major wardrobe malfunctions. Accessorizing? Minimal effort required. Maybe a watch, a simple necklace. You're not exactly going for the statement piece look this morning. Just trying to get out the door with your sanity intact. You're a practical person, that makes you better than most, you've got this. But where did all these clothes come from, anyway? Mass-produced fashion is a relatively recent phenomenon. Before the Industrial Revolution, most clothing was handmade, either by individuals or by skilled artisans. It was expensive, time-consuming, and often passed down through generations. So next time you're complaining about having nothing to wear, remember that your ancestors probably had 1 or 2 outfits, tops. Fun fact, in the 18th century, wigs were all the rage, especially for men. They were often powdered with flour or starch, and sometimes even scented. Imagine the maintenance. You'd need a dedicated wig grooming station. And the allergies. You know, maybe we're better off with the messy bun, after all. Historians still argue whether fashion is primarily driven by societal influences, or by individual creativity and expression. It's a complex interplay of trends, status symbols, and personal preferences. But one thing is certain, what we wear is always a statement, whether we intend it to be or not. You check your reflection one last time. You look acceptable. Not exactly runway ready, but good enough to face the world. You grab your keys, your wallet, your phone, the holy trinity of modern life, and head out the door. You take a deep breath of fresh, or not so fresh, depending on your location, air. The day stretches before you, full of possibilities and challenges. You're ready. Or, at least, as ready as you can be before your second cup of coffee. Remember, one day your feet will not touch this earth, make sure you are living. Okay, friend, let's go. Let's you and I amble through the forum. Feel the sun on your face, that's better, isn't it? Trudge, trudge, trudge with me now. We're not in a rush. No, no. Just, breathing it all in. See that guy selling, well, it looks like lukewarm goat's milk. Yeah, give that a hard pass. I'm not sure what the Roman equivalent of a health inspector was, but I'm betting they were perpetually napping. Anyway, you're standing on the most important real estate in the entire Roman world. This is the Forum Romanum, the bustling center of everything. Imagine the cacophony. Merchants hawking their wares, senators droning on about, whatever senators drone on about, probably taxes. Children chasing stray dogs. The clatter of sandals on paving stones, the bleating of sheep being led to market, the occasional blood-curdling scream from someone who just lost a bet in the comitium, the designated spot for political assemblies. Now, you might think that ancient Rome smelled ripe. And, well, you'd be right. But amongst the, let's call them earthy aromas, you'd also get whiffs of spices from the east, incense burning in the temples, and even the occasional perfume. Romans, especially the wealthy ones, loved their fragrances. They'd import ingredients from all over the empire and even invent new and interesting ways to extract the scents. Did you know that Roman fashion trend in the 1st century BC was to stink of patchouli? Seriously. It was the it scent. Like, if you weren't radiating patchouli, you were basically invisible. So, just imagine, a cloud of patchouli hanging over the forum on a hot summer day. You can practically taste it. Over there, that impressive-looking structure is the Temple of Saturn. Built way back in the early Republic, it housed the state treasury. Not just coins, mind you, but also important documents, standards, and other valuables. Basically, if you wanted to break the Roman economy, this was the place to hit. Good luck with that, though, it was heavily guarded. Heavily. Speaking of money, Romans were obsessed with it. You know, like us. They even had a goddess of money, Moneta, whose temple was located on the Capitoline Hill. The word money actually comes from her name. See, history is cool. It's just so very, very, very old, like this guy. Historians still argue whether the Temple of Saturn also served as a public record office. Some believe important laws and decrees were kept here, while others argue that those documents would have been stored elsewhere. Either way, it was a vital institution. Now, swing your head over this way. See those raised platforms? Those are the rostra. Basically, the speakers' platforms. This is where politicians like Cicero would come to deliver their rousing speeches, swaying the crowds with their eloquence, or, just shouting louder than everyone else. Imagine the drama. The gesturing. The sheer volume. I think that guy just fell asleep. Me too, buddy. Cicero was a master of rhetoric, a real wordsmith. He could use language to paint vivid pictures, evoke strong emotions, and generally convince people to do whatever he wanted. He was like the Roman version of a YouTube influencer, only with more togas and less sponsored content. Although, I bet he would have killed it with the product placements. But first, a word from our sponsor, this amazing olive oil, guaranteed to make you speak even more eloquently. One slightly embarrassing tidbit about Cicero, though. He was terrible at delivering jokes. Like, legendarily bad. His attempts at humor apparently fell flatter than a pancake run over by a chariot. Awkward. Back to the Forum. See that arch? That's the Arch of Titus, erected to commemorate Emperor Titus's victory in the Jewish War. It's a pretty standard victory arch, all triumphal and imposing. A bit like one of those giant metal gates you see at the entrance to a city, but made of stone and even more impressive. The Arch of Titus depicts the spoils taken from the temple in Jerusalem, including the menorah. It's a powerful symbol of Roman power and Jewish defeat. It also gives us a glimpse into the Roman understanding of other cultures and their, let's say, acquisition of valuable artifacts. And speaking of artifacts, a slightly more out there theory suggests that the Arch of Titus might also contain secret symbols related to, well, let's just say esoteric knowledge. Some believe it's more than just a monument to military victory, it's a hidden code, waiting to be deciphered. Conspiracy theorists have truly too much time on their hands. Come on, let's keep moving. The air is getting heavy and, wait. No, it's not. Is that, the basilicas? Those big, rectangular buildings are the basilicas. They weren't churches, despite what the name might suggest. They were multi-purpose buildings used for everything from law courts to markets to public gatherings. Think of them as the Roman equivalent of a modern-day shopping mall and courthouse rolled into one. The Basilica Julia, for instance, was primarily used as a law court. Imagine the lawyers in togas, arguing cases before a judge. You know, kinda like Law and Order, but with more dramatic hand gestures and fewer commercial breaks. The Basilica Emilia, on the other hand, was more of a commercial hub. Picture merchants displaying their goods, buyers haggling over prices, and the general hustle and bustle of a thriving marketplace. Romans loved their legal system. They were incredibly meticulous about laws and procedures. They even had a whole set of specialized legal terms and concepts, many of which are still used in modern legal systems today. So, next time you hear someone throw around a Latin legal term, you can impress them with your knowledge of ancient Roman law, or just yawn and pretend to be bored. I won't judge. I'm yawning right now. Historians still argue whether the basilicas were also used for religious purposes. While they weren't dedicated temples, some believe that religious rituals and ceremonies may have taken place within their walls. It's possible that they served as a kind of neutral ground, where the secular and the sacred could coexist. Alright, almost there. Just a few more steps. See that imposing building with the dome? That's the Pantheon. Okay, that one slightly outside of the Forum, but its influence ripples right into the heart of the whole scene. The Pantheon is one of the best preserved ancient Roman buildings. It was originally built as a temple to all the gods. Later, it was converted into a Christian church, which is why it's still standing today. The dome is an architectural marvel, a testament to Roman engineering prowess. The oculus, the circular opening at the top, is its most distinctive feature. The oculus served as the Pantheon's only source of natural light. When it rained, the water would fall through the oculus and drain away through a system of cleverly designed drains in the floor. The effect must have been stunning, a kind of indoor rain shower. I think that would actually wake me up. Here's a weird one. Some say that on certain days of the year, when the sun shines through the oculus at just the right angle, it illuminates a specific spot on the floor, marking a significant astronomical event. It's like a giant sundial. Sounds suspiciously like something out of a Dan Brown novel, if you ask me. But the idea of the Pantheon, the perfect symmetry, the grandeur of the space, it is all so moving, even today. But you're tired. I'm tired. Let's call it a day, friend. You've survived the Forum. And me. Congratulations. We'll dive into another corner of the Roman world soon enough. Until then, go rest your sandal-weary feet. Okay, let's talk business, baby. Let's talk about that sweet, sweet moolah, that cheddar, that daily bread. Let's talk about how you hustle. You wake up, maybe a little too early, maybe a little too late. Who am I to judge your sleep schedule? I'm just a disembodied voice, and the first thing on your mind, besides that desperate need for caffeine, is probably, how am I going to survive today? You trudge to your job, maybe it's fulfilling, maybe it's soul-crushing, but either way, it's providing you with the funds to, keep existing. And that, my friend, is business. It's the engine of civilization, the driving force behind everything from pyramids to pizza deliveries. Imagine yourself, thousands of years ago, no fancy latte to kickstart your day. Instead, you're staring at a field of barley, wondering if you'll manage to harvest enough to feed your family. Your job, as it were, is agriculture. You painstakingly till the land, sow the seeds, and pray to whatever gods are in charge of whether that this year will be a bountiful one. Surplus barley? That's basically ancient money. You can trade it for that shiny obsidian knife your neighbor has, or maybe even that ridiculously flattering woven tunic. You see, trade is as old as humanity itself. Even before currency, people were bartering goods and services. Think about it, one person's extra wool is another's desperately needed winter blanket. A system so intuitive, it's like your brain knows how to run a lemonade stand the moment you hit 7 years old. Historians still argue whether early trade was primarily driven by need or by a desire for exotic goods, but one thing is clear, it shaped societies and fostered connections between communities. Imagine you're a merchant in ancient Mesopotamia. You've packed your donkey cart with pottery and textiles, embarking on a journey to a neighboring city. The roads are dusty, bandits are a constant threat, and the journey takes weeks. But the potential rewards, a hefty profit in copper or precious stones, make it all worthwhile. You're the OG influencer, bringing new goods, ideas, and possibly even diseases, not sorry, it's history, to different cultures. You're basically a walking, talking, bartering Amazon Prime delivery, but with significantly slower shipping times and a higher chance of getting robbed. Now, let's fast forward a few centuries. You're a member of a medieval guild, a tightly knit organization of skilled artisans. Maybe you're a blacksmith, hammering out swords and plowshares. Or a weaver, creating intricate tapestries. The guild controls every aspect of your trade, from the quality of your materials to the price you charge. You learn your craft through years of apprenticeship, starting as a lowly scrub and eventually rising to the rank of master. Guilds are the original gatekeepers, controlling the supply and ensuring that only the most skilled and dedicated individuals can join their ranks. Think of the guild as the medieval version of a union, but with a lot more robes and secret handshakes. It's protectionism at its finest, but also a way to maintain standards and ensure fair practices, at least in theory. What's more, they were often centers of social life and mutual support, offering their members everything from financial assistance to funeral arrangements. It's like a workplace with way more ritual and significantly fewer HR complaints. Around this time, a quirky thing happened. A peculiar belief arose that certain professions were inherently dishonorable. Executioners, gravediggers, and even actors were often ostracized from mainstream society. Some historians argue this was due to their association with death, the supernatural, or activities deemed morally suspect. This meant that these dishonorable trades were often confined to the fringes of society, creating their own subcultures and communities. Imagine getting side-eyed for being a stagehand. Talk about drama. Moving along, let's jump into the age of exploration. Suddenly, you're a shareholder in the Dutch East India Company, the first multinational corporation. Spices, silks, and slaves, all flowing through your greedy little hands. This is capitalism on steroids, fueled by ambition, greed, and a whole lot of naval power. You're sending ships halfway around the world, establishing trading posts, and colonizing entire continents. Your risk tolerance is off the charts, but so are your potential profits. The Dutch East India Company was a pioneer in finance, issuing stocks and bonds, and basically inventing the modern financial system. Okay, slight detour. Did you know that tulips once caused a speculative bubble in the Netherlands? It's true. In the 17th century, tulip bulbs became so ridiculously expensive that people were trading houses and land for them. It was a classic case of irrational exuberance, where hype outstripped any real value. The bubble eventually burst, leaving many investors bankrupt. It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of following the herd and believing the hype, which, ironically, could be said about pretty much any cryptocurrency ever. Back to business. The Industrial Revolution hits, and suddenly you're working in a factory, surrounded by machines and noise. Your job is repetitive, monotonous, and probably quite dangerous. But it also provides you with a steady wage, allowing you to buy things you could never afford before. This is the dawn of mass production, where goods are made quickly and cheaply, changing the way people live and consume. The Industrial Revolution transformed society, creating new industries, new jobs, and new social classes. It's the reason you can buy a t-shirt for less than a fancy coffee. And speaking of coffee, the rise of coffeehouses in 17th and 18th century Europe was a major boon for business. These were places where merchants, intellectuals, and politicians gathered to discuss news, exchange ideas, and conduct deals. They were basically the original co-working spaces, but with more caffeine and less ergonomic furniture. Some historians argue that coffeehouses played a crucial role in the development of capitalism and democracy, by providing a forum for open debate and the exchange of information. Fast forward to today, and you're probably sitting in front of a computer screen, working in a digital economy. Maybe you're a coder, writing software. Or a marketer, crafting persuasive ads. Or an entrepreneur, launching your own startup. The world of business is constantly evolving, driven by technology, globalization, and the relentless pursuit of profit. The internet has democratized entrepreneurship, allowing anyone with an idea and a laptop to start a business. You can sell your products and services to customers all over the world, without ever leaving your home. The rise of the gig economy has also created new opportunities for flexible work, but it also raises concerns about job security and worker rights. Are we entering a new era of economic empowerment, or are we simply creating a society of precarious freelancers, constantly hustling for their next paycheck? Historians still argue whether the gig economy is a positive or negative development. One quirky fact: in the 19th century, some businesses actually hired people to wake up their workers in the morning. These knocker-uppers would use long poles to tap on people's windows until they got out of bed. Talk about a niche market. I wonder if they had a good wakey pitch they used. And now? Here you are, navigating the complexities of the modern business world. You're competing in a global marketplace, adapting to new technologies, and trying to balance your personal life with the demands of your career. It's a constant juggling act, but you're determined to make it work. Whether you're building the next unicorn startup, running a small business, or simply trying to climb the corporate ladder, you're part of something bigger than yourself. You're part of the endless, fascinating, and often frustrating story of business and trade. And you are making your daily bread. So go forth, be entrepreneurial, and don't forget to network. You got this. Okay, let's dive into the delicious, or possibly depressing, world of lunchtime. You trudge along, stomach rumbling, another morning successfully navigated. The fluorescent lights of the office hum their monotonous song, a lullaby of spreadsheets and deadlines. You're officially hangry. The question is, what are you going to do about it? The clock mocks you. 12:17 p.m. Too early for a respectable lunch, too late to pretend you're not starving. You check your wallet. The contents look back with judgmental eyes. Ramen or risotto? That's the question, isn't it? You could be sensible, practical. There's that sad-looking yogurt in the back of the communal fridge, the one with a suspicious amount of condensation. Or, you could throw caution to the wind. Embrace the chaos. Pizza. Glorious, greasy, cheesy pizza. Let's consider the history, shall we? The very concept of lunch, a midday meal, isn't as ancient as you might think. While the Romans certainly paused for a light snack, prandium, it wasn't quite the dedicated, carb-loading experience we now know and love. It was more like grabbing a handful of olives and some cheese while you're conquering Gaul. Which, let's be honest, sounds kind of appealing. Skip the meeting, conquer a small country, you know, the usual Tuesday. Speaking of ancient food rituals, did you know that some cultures used to believe that eating food dropped on the floor was perfectly acceptable, so long as you scooped it up within a certain time frame? The 5-second rule might be more deeply ingrained in our subconscious than we thought. And frankly, given some of the things I've seen people eat, I'm starting to think that belief might be making a comeback. Don't lie, you've done it. We've all done it. Historians still argue whether the formalization of lunch as a distinct meal really took off because of industrialization and the need to fuel factory workers. Makes sense, right? You can't efficiently churn out widgets on an empty stomach. Or perhaps it was a gradual social shift, a recognition that humans, those complex and needy creatures, require sustenance more frequently than just breakfast and dinner. Either way, you're grateful. You really are. Your stomach growls again, louder this time, a tiny, internal monster demanding to be fed. The yogurt is losing its appeal. You briefly entertain the thought of foraging in the office kitchen, perhaps liberating a rogue bag of chips from Brenda's desk. Brenda won't mind. Probably. She brings enough snacks to feed a small village. But guilt pangs you. No, you need a plan. Maybe you could brown bag it for the rest of the week. Think of the savings. You could finally afford that novelty rubber ducky you've been eyeing online. It even wears a tiny sombrero. But then you remember your track record with packed lunches. Day 1, Pinterest-worthy salad, meticulously arranged. Day 2, slightly wilted lettuce and a suspicious-looking tomato. Day 3, a despondent collection of crackers and a single, lonely cheese cube. It's a sad tale, really. A cautionary tale of good intentions gone horribly, horribly wrong. There was that one time you packed yourself an entire roasted chicken. Don't ask. It was ambitious. It smelled incredible, though. The entire office was bathed in the aroma of roasted poultry for 3 solid hours. You became a workplace hero, briefly. Until people realized the source of the tantalizing smell wasn't communal, wasn't for sharing. That was a fun afternoon. The aroma of that chicken, though, that's influencing you. You could go out. Treat yourself. You deserve it. You worked hard this morning. You answered all those emails. You even managed to untangle that ridiculously convoluted paperclip chain that had been plaguing your desk for weeks. You are, in short, a champion. A lunchtime champion. But where to go? The possibilities are endless, terrifying. There's the overpriced deli down the street with the vaguely judgmental staff and the sandwiches that cost more than your monthly streaming subscription. Then there's the questionable food truck that parks outside every Tuesday, the one that promises authentic cuisine but always seems to be out of everything except mystery meat tacos. Speaking of mysteries, let's talk about food origins. You know how sometimes you order something and wonder, who was the first person to think of putting that together? Like, who looked at an oyster and thought, yep, I'm gonna slurp that down. Or, even more terrifying, who decided that haggis was a good idea? Sheep stomach stuffed with, well, let's just say it's an acquired taste. One that you, personally, will likely never acquire. There's this bizarre, fringe theory that some historical figures weren't actually who we thought they were. Supposedly, King Arthur was actually a Roman general. Marie Antoinette was a time traveler. And Ronald McDonald was secretly running a global espionage ring disguised as a fast food franchise. Okay, I made that last one up. But the point is, sometimes the truth is stranger, and potentially less palatable, than fiction. Historians still argue whether certain culinary innovations were accidental discoveries or the result of deliberate experimentation. Was penicillin really a fluke, or did Alexander Fleming know something we don't? Did someone accidentally drop chocolate into peanut butter and think, "Eureka"? Or was it a carefully calculated stroke of genius? Whatever the truth, you are grateful for the delicious outcome. Your phone buzzes. It's a text from your friend, Sarah. Lunch, it reads. A lifeline. A beacon of hope in the vast, desolate wasteland of your indecision. You type back a hasty, enthusiastic yes, and arrange to meet at that little Italian place you both love. The one with the checkered tablecloths and the ridiculously large portions of pasta. Perfect. You're saved from the yogurt's judging eyes. Saved from Brenda's chips. Saved from the mystery meat tacos. You practically skip out of the office, the anticipation of carbohydrates and good company lifting your spirits. You envision the warm, comforting embrace of a plate of spaghetti carbonara. Creamy, cheesy, bacon-y goodness. You arrive at the restaurant, slightly breathless, slightly late. Sarah is already there, nursing a glass of water and looking significantly less stressed than you feel. You slide into the booth, sighing with relief. Rough morning? She asks, a knowing smile playing on her lips. You have no idea, you say. The paperclip chain, the emails, the existential dread, it's been a roller coaster. Sarah nods sympathetically. Well, she says, forget about all that. We're here now. Let's order. You grab a menu, and the familiar comfort washes over you. You've been here many times before. You know exactly what you want. The spaghetti carbonara, obviously. And maybe an appetizer of fried calamari. Because, why not? You deserve it. As you scan the menu, you can't help but think about the history of Italian food. Pasta, in particular, has a surprisingly long and winding history. Some believe it originated in China, while others insist that it was invented in Italy. Either way, it's now a staple of cuisines around the world. Speaking of food facts, did you know that honey is technically bee vomit? Think about that the next time you're drizzling it on your toast. It may change your perception of breakfast forever. Although, let's be honest, honey is still delicious. Even if it's technically bee vomit. Historians still argue about the precise origins of certain Italian dishes. Who invented pizza? Who first decided to put tomatoes on pasta? Was it a culinary genius or just someone who was really, really hungry? The world may never know. But you don't care. You just want to eat. The waitress arrives, and you order with gusto. Spaghetti carbonara for you, and Sarah opts for the lasagna. You both order the calamari, because, again, why not? As you wait for your food, you and Sarah catch up on each other's lives. Work, relationships, the usual. You laugh, you vent, you share stories. It's exactly what you needed. The food arrives, and it's even better than you imagined. The spaghetti carbonara is a creamy, decadent masterpiece. The calamari is crispy and perfectly seasoned. You devour it all with gusto, savoring every bite. As you eat, you reflect on the simple pleasure of a good lunch. It's more than just sustenance. It's a chance to recharge, to reconnect, to escape the drudgery of the day. It's a moment of peace and pleasure in a world that often feels chaotic and overwhelming. And with that, you take one last bite of your spaghetti, sigh contentedly, and prepare to face the afternoon. You're ready. Or, at least, you're more ready than you were before. You have spaghetti-fueled superpowers now. You can conquer anything. Except maybe that paperclip chain. That thing is pure evil. But you have a plan for that too. You'll just call Brenda. Maybe she'll let you borrow her industrial-strength paperclip remover. And maybe, just maybe, she'll even share her chips. Alright, let's talk about the Roman baths. Ah yes, the baths. Think of it as a spa day, but, like, really epic. You're tired, maybe a little road-weary after traversing the empire. Hey, even those fancy Roman roads can get bumpy, and you deserve a little pampering. So, you trudge through the grand entrance, maybe dodging a pigeon or two, and already you can hear the murmur of voices, the splash of water, and a vague hint of eucalyptus, or, well, whatever the ancient Roman equivalent of eucalyptus was. Olive oil? Probably olive oil. The first thing you need to do is pay your entrance fee. Think of it as a membership. Roman baths weren't free for everyone, but they were relatively inexpensive, making them accessible to a wide range of society. A pittance for a day of, well, semi-hygienic socializing. You head to the apoditerium, the changing room. Imagine a bustling, slightly chaotic space, filled with cubbyholes or shelves where you deposit your clothes. This is where things get interesting. You hand your tunic and sandals to a slave, unless, of course, you are the slave, in which case, you carefully fold your master's toga, and try not to make eye contact with anyone. Modesty wasn't exactly a high priority here. Think of it as a very public, ancient nudist colony. Just embrace it. Now, you're ready to begin your bathing ritual. First stop, the tepidarium. This is a warm air room, designed to acclimatize you to the hotter temperatures to come. It's like easing yourself into a bath instead of just plunging in and shocking your system. Smart, right? The Romans, despite some of their, let's say, questionable hygiene habits, were surprisingly savvy about certain things. You stand around, maybe chatting with your friends, or just awkwardly avoiding everyone, feeling the gentle warmth seep into your muscles. It's a bit like stepping into a sauna that hasn't quite reached full blast. But trust me, it's just the beginning. Next up is the caldarium, the hot bath. This is where the real fun begins. The air is thick with steam, and the water is, well, hot. Really hot. You ease yourself in slowly, trying not to yelp too loudly. Around you, people are chatting, laughing, maybe even conducting business deals. The Roman baths were more than just a place to get clean, they were a social hub, a place to see and be seen. Historians still argue whether the presence of such a social setting contributed to the decline of the Republic, all that gossiping instead of governing, perhaps. You soak for a while, letting the heat loosen your muscles and open your pores. Maybe you even take the opportunity to scrape yourself down with a strigil, a curved metal tool used to remove oil, sweat, and other things. It's basically like exfoliating with a butter knife. Fun. Now, here's where things get a little debated. Some sources suggest that after the caldarium, you might head to the laconicum, an even hotter, drier room, essentially a Roman sauna. Others claim that the laconicum was a separate, less common feature. Either way, the point is the same, you're trying to sweat out every last impurity. You're practically melting. It's all very intense. Finally, it's time for the frigidarium, the cold bath. Yes, you read that right. After all that heat, you plunge into a pool of icy cold water. It's shocking, invigorating, and guaranteed to wake you up faster than a double espresso. This part was probably the most dreaded for some bathers. It's supposed to close your pores, tone your skin, and leave you feeling refreshed. Or, just frozen. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, I'm clean-ish. What's next? Well, the Roman baths offered a whole range of other activities. You could get a massage, maybe from a burly slave who's not exactly gentle. Or you could head to the exercise area and work up a sweat all over again. Some baths even had libraries or gardens, where you could relax and read or stroll around. You might even watch some athletic games. Imagine the ancient version of ESPN, broadcast live, well, as live as you could get without electricity. And, of course, there was the socializing. The Roman baths were a great place to catch up on the latest gossip, network with important people, or just hang out with your friends. They even had food vendors. You could grab a snack of bread and cheese, or maybe even a sausage, because apparently, even Romans had a craving for processed meat after a good schwitz. Now, let's get into a little of the weird stuff. One quirky tidbit about Roman bathing: urine was apparently used as a cleaning agent. Yep, you read that right. Because urine contains ammonia, it was used to wash clothes and even whiten teeth. Talk about recycling. I bet that gives a whole new meaning to golden shower in the ancient Roman lexicon. And here's a mainstream historical fact: the baths of Caracalla, one of the largest and most famous Roman bath complexes, could accommodate over 1,600 bathers at a time. That's a lot of communal bathing. Imagine the logistical nightmare of keeping that much water cleanish. Another fun fact: some Roman baths even had heated floors, thanks to a clever system called a hypocaust. Hot air from a furnace was circulated under the floor, keeping your tootsies nice and toasty. Very fancy. Very environmentally unsound by today's standards, but back then, they were all about that thermal comfort. Now, there are a few things to keep in mind if you're planning your own Roman bath experience, which, let's face it, is probably not going to happen, unless you have a time machine. First, remember that Roman hygiene standards were different. Don't expect sparkling clean water and pristine conditions. Think more along the lines of slightly murky water and a general air of, well, let's just say, history. Also, be aware that the Roman baths were not exactly gender-neutral spaces. While some baths had separate areas for men and women, others were open to both sexes at different times of the day. And sometimes, well, things got a little frisky. Let's just say that the Roman baths had a reputation for being a place where people could let their hair down, and maybe a few other things as well. Not that you'd engage in such behaviors, right? Another thing: be prepared for the noise. The Roman baths were loud, crowded, and chaotic. It was a place of constant activity, with people talking, laughing, splashing, and generally making a ruckus. If you're looking for a peaceful, relaxing spa experience, this might not be the place for you. And finally, remember that the Roman baths were a reflection of Roman society as a whole. They were a place where people from all walks of life could come together, socialize, and, at least for a little while, forget about their troubles. They were a symbol of Roman power, wealth, and culture. And, yes, they were also a bit weird and gross. But hey, that's what makes them so fascinating. So, next time you're feeling stressed and need a little relaxation, remember the Roman baths. Just maybe skip the urine mouthwash and bring your own towel. And maybe some hand sanitizer. You can thank me later. Alright, settle in. Comfy? Good. Let's just dive right back into the sprawling, chaotic, utterly fascinating world of ancient Rome. Where were we? Yes, you were likely exhausted after a long day of, let's be honest, probably not being a senator. More likely, you were lugging around amphorae filled with olive oil, or, well, you get the picture. Life was work. And when you weren't working, you needed something. You needed entertainment. And honey, Rome delivered. You weren't exactly short on options. Forget Netflix and chill, think gladiators and thrill. The Romans were obsessed with spectacle, with the grand, the dramatic, the occasionally deadly. I mean, let's face it, sometimes you just need to see a heavily armored dude absolutely wallop another heavily armored dude. It's cathartic, you know? Releases the tension. And hey, if a lion gets involved, even better. Just kidding, mostly. Picture this: you're crammed into the Colosseum, or the Flavian Amphitheater, if you're feeling fancy, the air thick with the scent of sweat, cheap wine, and, well, let's just say sanitation wasn't exactly Rome's strong suit. The roar of the crowd is deafening. You're sitting, wherever you could find a spot, really. Probably not the best seats, let's be real, you're not exactly dripping in denarii. but you can see the arena floor. That's what matters. Gladiators stride out, all muscled and oiled and menacing. They salute the emperor, or whoever's in charge that day, with that famous line, "We who are about to die salute you." Dramatic, right? You can just feel the tension crackling in the air. It's a whole vibe. And then, it begins. The clash of steel, the grunts of exertion, the roar of the crowd intensifying with every blow. You're on the edge of your seat, gripped by the sheer brutality and skill on display. You probably brought some snacks. Maybe some olives and stale bread. Gotta stay hydrated, you know. All that screaming is thirsty work. These gladiatorial contests weren't just random brawls, you realize. They were highly structured events, with different types of gladiators, each with their own weapons, armor, and fighting style. You've got your Thracians with their curved swords and small shields. Your Myrmilones with their helmets shaped like fish. Your Retiarii, armed with nets and tridents, looking like they just stepped out of a seafood restaurant. It's like Pokemon, but with significantly more bloodshed. And speaking of variety, sometimes you'd see naval battles staged in the arena. They would flood the Colosseum, and, honestly, imagine the logistics of that, and recreate sea battles. I mean, come on. Talk about an environmental nightmare. Yeah, let's just dump a few million gallons of water into this giant stone bowl, what could go wrong? Historians still argue whether these Naumachii, that's what they called them, by the way, were truly realistic or just heavily choreographed shows. My guess? A little bit of both. A touch of historical accuracy mixed with a whole lot of dramatic license. Gotta keep the plebs entertained, after all. But gladiatorial combat wasn't the only bloodsport on the Roman menu. There were also venations, which involved hunting wild animals. Lions, tigers, bears, oh my. Seriously, all sorts of exotic creatures were brought to Rome for these spectacles. Think of it as a really, really twisted version of a zoo visit. Except instead of taking selfies, you're watching the animals get slaughtered. Yikes. And just so you know, the death rate for animals in these events was, well, substantial. It's estimated that thousands of animals could be killed in a single day of venations. Yikes again. You almost feel bad for the poor creatures, until you remember that some of them were probably trained to kill people. Okay, maybe not that bad. Now, you might be thinking, okay, this is all very barbaric. Surely the Romans had other forms of entertainment? And you'd be right. Partially. Because alongside the blood and guts, there was also theater. Ancient Roman theater was a big deal. It was a chance to escape the drudgery of daily life, to laugh, to cry, to contemplate the human condition. Or, you know, just watch some slapstick comedy and throw peanuts at the actors. It depended on the show, really. Roman theater was heavily influenced by Greek theater, but with a distinctly Roman twist. For one thing, Roman plays were often more explicit. Let's just say they weren't afraid to push the boundaries of good taste. Think, raunchy jokes, cross-dressing, and lots of physical comedy. It was the Borat of its day. There were two main types of Roman plays, tragedies and comedies. Tragedies, as you might expect, were serious and dramatic, dealing with themes of love, loss, and revenge. Think Shakespeare, but with more togas. Comedies, on the other hand, were light-hearted and humorous, often poking fun at everyday life and human foibles. And the actors. Oh, the actors. They were stars, celebrities in their own right. They wore elaborate masks to portray different characters, and their performances were often larger than life. You might recognize some names if you're really into Roman history. If not, well, you can just imagine them as the Brad Pitts and Angelina Jolies of their time. Except, you know, they're reciting lines in Latin. Now, here's a fun fact, Roman actors were often slaves or freedmen. Which means that while they might have been famous and admired, they weren't exactly rolling in money. In fact, their social status was often questionable. Imagine being a famous actor, but still having to deal with the societal stigma of being a former slave. Talk about a downer. But here's where things get interesting. Remember how I said Roman plays were often more explicit? Well, that wasn't just in terms of raunchy jokes. Some plays also featured actual sex. Yep, you heard that right. Stage sex. In front of a live audience. Historians still argue whether these scenes were truly explicit or just suggestive, but, well, let's just say the Romans weren't exactly shy about showing a little skin. And if you weren't into plays, you could always check out some mimes. Roman mimes were, well, they were basically the ancient Roman equivalent of street performers. They would perform short, improvisational skits, often involving music, dance, and, well, mime. But here's the thing about Roman mimes, they weren't always silent. In fact, they often incorporated dialogue, songs, and even insults. They would heckle the audience, make fun of politicians, and generally cause mayhem. They were basically the stand-up comedians of their day. But with more face paint. And speaking of music, the Romans were also big fans of, well, music. They had all sorts of instruments, from flutes and lyres to trumpets and drums. They used music for everything from religious ceremonies to military marches to, well, just plain old entertainment. You might find yourself at a banquet, where musicians would play soothing melodies to accompany the meal. Or you might stumble upon a street performance, where a group of musicians would play lively tunes to attract a crowd. Or you might even attend a gladiatorial contest, where musicians would provide a dramatic soundtrack to the bloodshed. It's like having the Rocky soundtrack, but live. And with more lions. And if you were really lucky, you might even get to see a water organ. Yep, that's right. A water-powered organ. The Romans were incredibly inventive when it came to music. These elaborate instruments used water pressure to create sound, and they were often used in theatrical performances and public spectacles. Talk about a conversation starter at parties. Oh, this old thing? Just my water organ. I had it custom made. So, between the gladiators, the theater, the mimes, and the music, you can see that the Romans had plenty of ways to entertain themselves. Whether you were a wealthy patrician or a lowly pleb, there was always something to do, something to see, something to distract you from the harsh realities of daily life. And sometimes, you just needed that distraction. You know? A little bit of escapism. A little bit of mindless entertainment. Because even in ancient Rome, life could be a lot. You trudged through the dirty streets, avoided the pickpockets, dealt with the noisy crowds, and then you collapsed in a chair, and reached for some bread, and watched a gladiator get mauled by a lion. Ah, Rome. Okay, settle in, settle in. Let's get comfy. You're nestled into your favorite chair, maybe you've got a cup of chamomile tea, and we're just gonna drift through a little exploration of family life, huh? Not your family, necessarily. We're talking about the general concept of family matters across time. Roles, responsibilities, that whole shebang. Think of it as a historical ASMR experience. So, you wake up. The year? Let's say, 1642. Colonial Massachusetts. You're the wife of a yeoman farmer, which, let's be honest, sounds a lot more romantic than it actually is. You're definitely not sleeping in. Nope. The sun's barely peeked over the horizon and you're already hustling. The fire needs tending, remember, no central heating. And that means hauling wood. Picture it, you, in your slightly scratchy linen shift, lugging logs that seem disproportionately heavy. You're probably muttering something under your breath, a sentiment not entirely dissimilar to your own early morning gripes. Then, it's the kids. Wrangling little ones, ensuring they're fed some sort of porridge that's probably pretty bland. Maybe you've got an older daughter helping out, learning the ropes of household management. Because, surprise, your day is filled with management. It's cooking, cleaning, mending clothes, which is a constant battle, let's be real, little rascals, and tending to the garden. This is your domain, your realm. Your husband is out in the fields, toiling away, but you are the CEO of this domestic enterprise. And let's talk about that garden. You're not just growing pretty flowers, darling. That's sustenance. That's medicine. You're cultivating herbs for tinctures and poultices to treat everything from a cough to a festering wound. Think of yourself as a 17th century pharmacist and gourmet chef combined. Historians still argue whether the emphasis on female domesticity in the early modern era was empowering or restrictive. I mean, you're running the show, but you're also kind of stuck in the show. Speaking of the show, a little later on, maybe you'd get a chance to spin some wool. See if you can picture this. The rhythmic whir of the wheel, the soft texture of the wool between your fingers. It sounds kind of relaxing, right? Except you're also simultaneously keeping an eye on the toddler who's determined to eat dirt, and trying to remember if you remembered to soak the beans for tomorrow's dinner. Now, let's hop across the pond and fast forward a couple of centuries. Victorian England. You're not a farmer's wife anymore. You're, well, it depends. Let's say you're the daughter of a moderately successful merchant. Life is a tad less physically demanding. You're not hauling wood, at least not regularly. Instead, you're expected to be a paragon of virtue and refinement. Think needlepoint, piano playing, and generally being pleasing to the eye. Your days are structured around social calls, lessons, and perhaps a bit of charitable work. Because, let's be honest, being a lady of leisure is a full-time job in itself. You're expected to maintain a certain image, which involves corsets that probably feel like a medieval torture device, and elaborate hairstyles that take hours to create. And, of course, you're constantly on the lookout for a suitable husband. Remember, your primary role is to marry well and produce heirs. It's a bit like a very elaborate, very high-stakes dating game. And here's a quirky Victorian tidbit for you. Did you know that it was considered bad luck to wear green on your wedding day? Apparently, it was associated with fairies and bad fortune. Now, that's a color coordination issue you don't want to face. But, hey, at least you don't have to churn butter, right? Small mercies. You probably do have to manage a household staff, though. Which is its own kind of headache, I imagine. Dealing with temperamental cooks, gossiping maids, and the occasional footman who's trying to steal the silverware. It's basically Downton Abbey, but with less dramatic intrigue and significantly more dusting. The Industrial Revolution was really transforming society, right? Urban centers were growing exponentially, creating a new middle class and with it, new opportunities but new anxieties as well. Now, let's zoom forward to the 1950s America. You're wearing a fabulous dress with a cinched waist, and you're baking a perfect apple pie. Suburbia is booming, and you're living the American dream. Or, at least, you're projecting the American dream. Your husband is the breadwinner, he goes off to work in his gray flannel suit. You stay home, keep the house tidy, raise the kids, and generally embody the image of the happy housewife. But beneath that picture-perfect facade, things are, well, a little more complicated. You're expected to be the emotional center of the family. The rock. The ever-present source of comfort and support. But what about your needs? Your ambitions? You may be feeling a little restless. A little unfulfilled. The rise of television was really creating a common cultural experience, shaping values and expectations in pretty profound ways. Speaking of expectations, here's a quirky tidbit. Did you know that there were actual charm schools that taught women how to walk, talk, and even breathe like a proper lady? It's like finishing school, but on steroids. Imagine learning how to gracefully pick up a teacup. That's dedication. Historians still argue whether the 1950s was a golden age of domesticity or a period of suppressed female potential. I mean, on the one hand, there's a certain comfort in the stability and security. On the other hand, there's that lingering feeling that you're not quite living up to your full potential. Okay, one quick stop before we get back to the present. Let's pop over to feudal Japan. You are the wife of a samurai. Discipline is the watchword. Duty the lodestar. Your days are filled with managing the household, tending to the children, and upholding the honor of your family. You might have to learn basic self-defense. And you must be ready, at any moment, to commit suicide to defend the honor of the family or husband. You're probably thinking, whoa, okay, let's backtrack a bit. But it is essential to see that family matters are not just about nurturing and comfort. They can also be about power, status, and even sacrifice. In feudal Japan, the family was the bedrock of society, and everyone had a specific role to play. One interesting fact is that adoption was very common. If a family didn't have a male heir, they could adopt a man from another family to carry on the lineage. And one fun thing you might not know is that Japanese samurai women sometimes carried a small dagger called a kaiken for self-defense. See, they weren't exactly helpless wallflowers. Now, jump back to the present. You are, well, you. You could be anything. You could be a single parent juggling work and childcare. You could be part of a blended family navigating complex relationships. You could be a stay-at-home parent, or a CEO, or something in between. The roles and responsibilities within families are so much more fluid and diverse than they were in the past. And this is great. You're probably using technology to manage your life. Ordering groceries online, scheduling appointments through an app, and maybe even video chatting with your relatives who live far away. Family communication is more convenient than ever. Historians still argue whether social media connects or isolates us from our families. I mean, you can share photos and updates instantly, but you can also get caught up in comparing your life to others' curated highlight reels. You might not be wearing a corset or churning butter, but you're facing your own set of unique challenges. Balancing work and family, navigating social media, and trying to raise kids in a world that feels increasingly complex and uncertain. But one thing remains constant: the importance of connection. The need for love, support, and a sense of belonging. Whether you're living in colonial Massachusetts, Victorian England, or the 21st century, family matters. They shape who you are, how you see the world, and the legacy you leave behind. That's something to consider. That's something to reflect on. And that's something to appreciate. Right, so the sun's dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in, like, really dramatic shades of orange and purple. Think Instagram filter before filters were even a thing. You trudge towards the longhouse, your stomach rumbling louder than a blacksmith's hammer on a Monday morning. All that axe-wielding and shield-bashing has worked up quite the appetite, hasn't it? You can practically smell the roasting meat from here, a symphony of deliciousness that promises a temporary truce with your aching muscles. Before you even cross the threshold, the sheer noise hits you. It's a cacophony of voices, laughter, and the clatter of wooden trenchers. Imagine a particularly rowdy family reunion, but everyone is dressed in furs and carries a very sharp knife. Take a deep breath, friend, you're diving headfirst into the Viking social scene. Inside, the longhouse is bathed in the flickering light of oil lamps and the warm glow of the central hearth. Shadows dance on the walls, making the carved wooden figures seem to come alive. You find a spot on a bench, hopefully, one that isn't already occupied by a particularly large and territorial-looking warrior, and prepare for the evening's entertainment, dinner and, well, socializing. Dinner isn't exactly a delicate affair. Forget dainty forks and perfectly portioned plates. We're talking communal platters piled high with roasted meats, probably boar, maybe some mutton if you're lucky, or even, if the gods are truly smiling upon you, a bit of beef. Imagine tearing off a chunk with your bare hands, the juices running down your chin. Attractive, right? You'll also find some bread, likely coarse and dark, and maybe some stewed vegetables, if they haven't been entirely devoured by the children already. Think of it as medieval potluck, with more fur. Now, about the meat. Vikings were serious about their protein. Recent archaeological finds, analyzing bone fragments, suggest that they even practiced selective breeding to get larger, meatier livestock. Talk about dedication to dinner. So, you grab a piece, maybe a particularly gnarly-looking rib, and dig in. There are no napkins, of course. Your tunic sleeve will have to do. As you eat, the ale flows freely. Mead too, if you're feeling fancy. These beverages weren't just for quenching thirst, they were social lubricants, conversation starters, and, let's be honest, probably contributed to a lot of questionable decisions later in the evening. Now, historians still argue whether the Vikings were actually more drunk than other cultures of the time, but given their reputation for raiding and general boisterousness, it's probably a safe bet that they knew how to party. Conversation swirls around you. You hear boasts of daring raids, tales of epic battles, and the occasional bawdy joke. You join in, maybe exaggerating your own accomplishments just a tiny bit. It's all part of the game. Storytelling was a vital part of Viking culture, a way to pass down knowledge, preserve history, and, impress the ladies, or lads, depending on your preference. The Vikings weren't exactly shy about exploring different lifestyles. The seating arrangement itself reveals the social hierarchy. The chieftain and other prominent figures would occupy the high seats, closest to the hearth and furthest from the drafty doorway. You, a mere foot soldier, or thrall, if you're really having a bad day, would be further down the pecking order. But hey, at least you're inside and fed, right? It's worth mentioning that the Vikings weren't just savage warriors. They were also surprisingly clean, at least by the standards of the time. Archaeological evidence shows they used combs, razors, and even ear spoons. They also took regular baths, which, let's be honest, probably gave them a significant advantage in the dating scene. Who knew hygiene could be a superpower? Now, as the evening wears on, the mood shifts. The boasting fades, replaced by singing and the telling of sagas. Skilled storytellers, known as skalds, would recite epic poems, recounting the deeds of legendary heroes and the exploits of the gods. You listen, mesmerized by their words, even if you don't understand every nuance of the Old Norse language. It's like binge-watching a really long and complicated fantasy series, but live. Music plays a big role too. Lyres, flutes, and drums fill the longhouse with rhythmic sounds. Maybe someone even breaks out a jaw harp, that weird little instrument you sometimes see at Renaissance fairs. It's all very atmospheric. You might even find yourself tapping your foot along to the beat, even though you have absolutely no idea what the song is about. And then there are the games. Dice games, board games, even wrestling matches in the middle of the longhouse floor. These weren't just for amusement, they were tests of skill, strategy, and strength. Losing a game might mean a bruised ego, or maybe even a lost wager. But hey, it's all in good fun, right? Right? Speaking of wagers, did you know Vikings were surprisingly good at math? They needed to be, for trade and navigation. They used a base 12 system, duodecimal, which is why we still have 12 inches in a foot. So, while you might be picturing them as just burly barbarians, they were actually pretty clever with numbers. And that, my friend, is a fun fact to drop at your next cocktail party. As the night progresses, things get interesting. The ale flows even more freely, and inhibitions start to loosen. You might witness some truly impressive feats of strength, some surprisingly heartfelt confessions, or maybe even a full-blown brawl. Don't worry, usually they sort it all out. But it's all part of the Viking experience. Now, a quirky tidbit, there's evidence to suggest that Vikings occasionally engaged in ritualistic animal sacrifice, followed by, a communal feast. Historians still debate the exact purpose of these rituals, but it's safe to say they weren't vegetarian-friendly. Just try not to think about it while you're gnawing on that roast boar. And then there's the issue of personal space. Or rather, the lack thereof. In a crowded longhouse, privacy is a luxury you simply can't afford. You're essentially living in a giant, communal dormitory. Snoring, farting, and the occasional midnight wanderer are all part of the package. Invest in some earplugs, metaphorically speaking, of course, earplugs hadn't been invented yet. As the fire starts to die down and the ale runs low, people begin to settle in for the night. You find a spot on the floor, maybe with a fur blanket if you're lucky, and try to get comfortable. The longhouse is still noisy, but the chaos has subsided into a low hum. You close your eyes, listening to the crackling fire and the gentle snores of your fellow Vikings. Fun fact alert. Vikings were known to tell bedtime stories. These tales often involved gods, heroes, and mythical creatures, serving as a way to entertain and educate younger generations. So, while you're drifting off to sleep, imagine someone whispering tales of Thor and Odin into your ear. It's strangely comforting, in a very Viking sort of way. You might think, wow, this sounds absolutely dreadful. But there's something strangely appealing about the simplicity of it all. No phones, no emails, no social media. Just good food, good company, and the occasional drunken brawl. It's a break from the modern world, a chance to connect with people on a more primal level. So, as you drift off to sleep in the dimly lit longhouse, surrounded by the sounds and smells of Viking life, you can't help but wonder, what will tomorrow bring? More raiding? More feasting? Maybe even a little bit of pillaging? Whatever it is, you know it's going to be an experience. And that, my friend, is the Viking life in a nutshell. Alright, settle in, friend. Let's talk gods and anxieties, daily rituals and the little voices in your head that tell you to knock on wood. Because, let's face it, whether you're lighting incense to a benevolent deity or just avoiding walking under ladders, you're probably engaging in some form of religious or superstitious behavior. You might not even realize it. You rise with the sun, or more likely, the insistent beeping of your alarm. The early morning light streams through your window, and you might unconsciously offer a moment of gratitude for another day. Or maybe you just groan and hit snooze. Either way, you're participating in a ritual. A very modern ritual, sure, but a ritual nonetheless. Historians still argue whether the modern obsession with morning routines is just another manifestation of our innate need for structured belief systems. You pull on your socks, making sure to put on the left one first. Superstition? Maybe. Comforting habit? Probably. But the ancient Romans believed that the left side was associated with bad luck and omens, so perhaps you're channeling some ancient anxiety without even knowing it. Did you know that Julius Caesar was famously superstitious? He often consulted soothsayers before making major decisions, which, spoiler alert, didn't exactly save him from a certain stabbing incident. You head to the kitchen, brewing your coffee. Black, no sugar. Just like you like it. You spill a little bit on the counter. Oops. You quickly wipe it up. But a little voice whispers in your ear, oh, that's bad luck. You're gonna have a terrible Tuesday. Relax, it's just coffee. Unless, what if coffee stains are the new tea leaves? Instead of tasseography, we'll have caffeemancy. Someone get on that. I'm seeing, yes, an overturned car and a disgruntled chihuahua in your future. But don't worry, it could just be gas. You check your phone. Oh look, a text from your mom. She wants to know if you've seen a certain meme she sent. You haven't. You scroll through your feed, a modern-day oracle where algorithms dictate your fate. You see an article about a celebrity sighting, and you scoff. Who cares, you think. But you keep scrolling. Because even in the age of instant information, we're still drawn to the narratives, the stories, the myths of our time. You head out the door, grabbing your keys. You give your houseplant a little pat, because you heard somewhere that plants like being talked to. You might not believe in plant spirits, but you figure it can't hurt. And hey, maybe it's a modern form of animism, the belief that objects and places all possess a distinct spiritual essence. Speaking of animism, did you know that some cultures believe certain rocks are alive? Yeah, try explaining that one to airport security. You walk down the street, passing a construction site. You automatically avoid walking directly under the scaffolding. Smart move. It's not just superstition, it's also common sense. Although, the superstition itself probably arose from a time when construction standards were, shall we say, less than ideal. Less OSHA, more hope for the best. You arrive at work. It's Monday. You sigh. You see your coworker, Sarah, wearing a new crystal necklace. It's supposed to ward off negative energy, she explains. You smile politely. You're not exactly a crystal person yourself, but hey, if it makes her feel better, who are you to judge? Historians still argue whether the recent resurgence in crystal healing and other New Age practices is a sign of spiritual seeking or just another consumer trend. I wonder if there's a crystal for dealing with passive-aggressive coworkers. I'm gonna need that. The day drags on. You attend meetings, answer emails, and try to look busy when your boss walks by. You get a chain email forwarded from your Aunt Carol. It promises good luck if you forward it to 10 people, and bad luck if you break the chain. You roll your eyes and delete it. You're not falling for that old trick. But a tiny voice in the back of your head whispers, but what if? You finally finish your work for the day. You head home, exhausted. You pass by a church. You don't go in, but you pause for a moment, listening to the faint strains of music coming from inside. Maybe you think about your grandma, who used to take you to church every Sunday. Or maybe you just appreciate the beauty of the architecture. Either way, you're acknowledging a space that has been sacred to people for centuries. You get home and collapse on the couch. You turn on the TV, flipping through channels. You land on a show about ghosts. You don't believe in ghosts, but you're fascinated nonetheless. You watch as the ghost hunters investigate a haunted house, armed with EMF readers and infrared cameras. You wonder if they ever find anything real, or if it's all just theatrics. Speaking of ghosts, apparently, there's a town in Pennsylvania that's officially declared itself the most haunted town in America. Maybe they should invest in some better PR. You finally turn off the TV and get ready for bed. You brush your teeth, wash your face, and put on your pajamas. You say a little prayer, even though you haven't really prayed in years. It's just a habit, a way of ending the day, a small ritual to help you feel at peace. You climb into bed, pulling the covers up to your chin. You close your eyes, and you hope for a good night's sleep. As you drift off to sleep, you might dream of gods and goddesses, of rituals and superstitions, of the countless ways that humans have tried to make sense of the world around them. You might dream of ancient temples and modern skyscrapers, of forgotten languages and viral memes, of the endless quest for meaning and the comforting embrace of belief. And maybe, just maybe, you'll wake up tomorrow feeling a little bit more connected to the past, a little bit more aware of the present, and a little bit more hopeful for the future. Or maybe you'll just wake up needing another cup of coffee. It's your call, friend. It's your call. Historians still argue whether dreams are messages from the divine or just random firings of neurons. Alright, settle in, settle in. Let's talk, well, let's talk about you. Specifically, you and your health back in the day. You trudge through the muddy streets, probably smelling of wood smoke and whatever that questionable stew was last night. Your clothes, let's be honest, aren't exactly fresh, and you've got that persistent tickle in your throat that you've been trying to ignore for the past 3 days. Yeah, life back then was a constant game of, is it just a sniffle, or am I about to spontaneously develop consumption? Good times. You probably wouldn't see a doctor for that tickle, at least not right away. Doctors, or rather, apothecaries and barber surgeons, were expensive. Plus, the treatments, well, let's just say they weren't always the most effective. You might try some home remedies first. Maybe a poultice of herbs your grandmother swears by, or a swig of that questionable home-brewed ale you keep in the cellar for medicinal purposes. I mean, hey, alcohol kills germs, right? Maybe? Don't quote me on that. And speaking of germs, you didn't exactly know what they were. The germ theory of disease was still a few centuries away. People generally believed that illness was caused by an imbalance of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. If you were feeling under the weather, it meant one of these humors was out of whack. The solution? Get it back in balance. That could involve bloodletting, purging, or inducing vomiting. Because nothing says healthy like willingly making yourself sicker, right? Actually, bloodletting was a huge thing. Like, seriously. Doctors used it for everything. Fever? Bloodletting. Headache? Bloodletting. Stubbed toe? You guessed it, bloodletting. George Washington, the first president of the United States, famously died after being treated for a throat infection with bloodletting. It's thought he lost something like 5 pints of blood in a single day. 5 pints. I bet that didn't help his throat any. Although, to be fair, historians still argue whether he would have survived anyway, given the severity of the infection. And it wasn't just doctors doing the bloodletting, either. Barber surgeons were also in on the action. That's why barber poles are red and white, to represent blood and bandages. Fun fact, the blue stripe was added later, in America, to give it that patriotic flair. Anyway, you'd pop in to get your beard trimmed and maybe a quick drain of the old vital fluids. 2 birds, 1 stone. Efficient. Although, thinking about it, you'd have to hope your barber surgeon was having a good day. I mean, imagine the pressure. One wrong slip and, well, let's not go there. Now, let's talk about hygiene, or the distinct lack thereof. Bathing wasn't exactly a daily occurrence. People believed that frequent washing was bad for you, that it stripped away your body's natural defenses and left you vulnerable to disease. So, you might wash your face and hands occasionally, but a full-body scrub was a rare event, maybe once a month, if that. And let's be honest, the water probably wasn't the cleanest to begin with. You were likely sharing that bath water with the rest of the family, and maybe even the pets. Cozy. Of course, this lack of hygiene led to some interesting smells. People used perfumes and pomanders filled with sweet-smelling herbs to mask the odors. But let's be real, those perfumes were probably just covering up a whole lot of funk. You could probably smell someone coming from a mile away, and not in a good way. Imagine the first impression. Oh, hello there, stranger. You smell vaguely of lavender and unwashed feet. Charming. Speaking of covering up smells, did you know that people used to wear wigs to hide lice and other scalp ailments? Yeah, those elaborate powdered wigs weren't just for fashion. They were also a convenient way to keep your head from itching like crazy. You could just take off the wig, boil it to kill the bugs, and then pop it back on. Problem solved. At least, until the next infestation. Honestly, I'm starting to feel itchy just thinking about it. But it wasn't all doom and gloom when it came to health. People did have some knowledge of herbal remedies and natural treatments. They used willow bark to relieve pain. Willow bark contains salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirin, and they knew that certain foods could help with certain ailments. For example, eating plenty of fruits and vegetables was thought to boost your immune system, although they wouldn't have called it that. They just knew that eating healthy made you feel better. Smart cookies, those folks. One somewhat fringe medical practice involved the use of leeches. Not just for bloodletting, but for other ailments too. People believed that leeches could suck out the bad blood and restore balance to the body. They even used leeches to treat headaches and skin problems. I'm not sure how effective it was, but hey, at least it gave you something to talk about. Oh, just sitting here with my leeches. No big deal. And then there were the superstitions. Oh, the superstitions. People believed that illness could be caused by curses, evil spirits, or even the alignment of the planets. To ward off these evil influences, they would wear amulets, carry charms, and perform rituals. They might even consult a witch or a wise woman for advice. I mean, hey, you had to cover all your bases, right? Can't hurt to throw a little magic into the mix, just in case. Speaking of witches, the Salem witch trials of the late 17th century are a pretty grim reminder of how fear and superstition could lead to tragedy. Many of the accused witches were simply women who were knowledgeable about herbs and medicine, and who were seen as a threat to the established order. It's a sad chapter in history, and a good reminder to be skeptical of unfounded accusations. Life expectancy back then was significantly lower than it is today. Infant mortality was high, and many people died from infectious diseases like smallpox, measles, and plague. But it's important to remember that people weren't just dropping like flies all the time. Many people lived to a ripe old age, especially if they had access to good food, clean water, and decent living conditions. And sometimes, people just got lucky. They had a strong constitution, a good support system, and a little bit of common sense. They knew how to take care of themselves, and they were able to weather the storms of life, both literally and figuratively. And even if they didn't always have the best medical care, they had something that we often lack today, a strong sense of community. People relied on each other for support, and they weren't afraid to ask for help when they needed it. And as you finally start drifting off to sleep, you might think about how far we've come in terms of medicine and hygiene. We have antibiotics, vaccines, and clean running water. We know about germs and viruses, and we have hospitals and doctors who can treat a wide range of illnesses. But it's also important to remember the lessons of the past. To appreciate the knowledge of our ancestors, and to be grateful for the blessings we have today. And maybe, just maybe, to wash your hands a little more often. You know, just in case. Okay, settle in, friend. Let's explore. You trudge down the rain-slicked cobblestones, the air thick with the smells of wood smoke, stale beer, and something vaguely latrine-adjacent. It's not exactly a walk in the park, is it? More like a stumble through a public health crisis waiting to happen. Seriously, watch your step, that's not mud. You clutch your purse a little tighter. Maybe you should have worn your chainmail undershirt. Probably overkill, honestly. This isn't exactly the fictional Gotham City, but the general vibe is, let's say, opportunity-rich for those less ethically inclined. You're basically a walking, talking tourist attraction for pickpockets. Remember to keep your wits about you, friend, and try not to look too lost, even if you are. Confidence is key. Or, you know, a hefty bludgeon. Your call. Speaking of unpleasantries, let's talk about disease. Because, you know, fun. In this era, a simple scratch could become a life-threatening infection faster than you can say, germ theory. Which, incidentally, hasn't been invented yet. Doctors are still operating on the four humors principle: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Essentially, if you're sick, you're probably just out of balance. The cure? Well, depends on which humor is supposedly causing the problem. Too much blood? Leeches? Black bile got you down? Maybe some purging? It's all very scientific. Historians still argue whether the bubonic plague was actually caused by rats and fleas in the way we typically think of it. Recent research suggests that human fleas and lice might have played a much larger role in its spread. Just another reminder that sometimes, the biggest threats come in the smallest, itchiest packages. Imagine your teeth. Go on, think about them. Now imagine they haven't been brushed in, well, ever. Dentistry isn't exactly a booming industry yet. You're relying on twigs, the occasional piece of charcoal, and a whole lot of hope. The result? Let's just say a dazzling smile wasn't exactly a common feature. Toothache? Probably pulling the darn thing is your only option. Good times. And crime? Oh, it's a smorgasbord of mayhem. Pickpockets are the least of your worries. We're talking highwaymen lurking on the outskirts of town, ready to relieve you of your valuables, and possibly your life. Back alleys become shadowy stages for all sorts of shady dealings. Your best bet? Stick to well-lit areas, even if well-lit means a sputtering oil lamp that casts more shadows than it illuminates. Fun fact, in medieval England, it was perfectly legal to kill a Scotsman found within city walls after dark. Just a little historical trivia to lighten the mood. Though, given the levels of hygiene back then, maybe the Scotsmen were just trying to escape the smell. I'm kidding, of course. Mostly. You pass a group of men gambling in a tavern. The air is thick with the aroma of stale ale, sweat, and desperation. One of them throws down his last coin, a look of utter despair on his face. Another lets out a triumphant roar. Gambling was a popular pastime, a way to momentarily escape the drudgery of daily life. It also, you suspect, drove many people straight into the arms of poverty. Historians still debate the extent to which gambling contributed to social unrest. Was it merely a harmless distraction, or a catalyst for crime and destitution? The answer, as always, is probably somewhere in between. You hear a commotion down the street, shouts, screams, the unmistakable sound of shattering glass. You instinctively duck into a doorway, your heart pounding in your chest. Is it a brawl? A robbery gone wrong? Or perhaps just someone who spilled their milk? Who knows? Best to avoid confrontation and simply slink away unnoticed. Remember, you're just an observer. A time-traveling tourist, if you will. Try not to interfere. Don't start any wars, don't introduce penicillin, and for goodness sake, don't mention the internet. Just soak it all in, appreciate the historical ambience, and try not to get stabbed. Let's talk about food. You see a vendor selling what looks vaguely like meat pies. You squint. What kind of meat? He shrugs noncommittally. Meat, he says, with a knowing wink. Best not to ask too many questions. Let's just say that food safety regulations were not exactly a top priority back then. One quirky thing is that swans were considered a delicacy enjoyed by the upper classes. Imagine serving swan at your next dinner party. It's a bold move, Cotton, let's see if it pays off. The town crier wanders past, ringing his bell and shouting the latest news. Hear ye, hear ye. The king has declared a new tax on, well, everything. You sigh inwardly. Taxes. The one constant throughout history. Even in the past, you can't escape the long arm of bureaucracy. Historians still argue about the fairness and effectiveness of medieval taxation systems. Were they necessary to fund essential services, or merely a tool of oppression? Again, a nuanced question with no easy answers. But if you want my opinion, I think the taxes were a little high. You glance at your reflection in a puddle of rainwater. You're looking a little worse for wear, aren't you? Your clothes are dusty, your hair is a mess, and you probably smell faintly of manure. Welcome to the past, my friend. Glamour is optional. Survival is not. Hey, did you know they didn't have toilet paper back then? They used communal sponges on sticks. Seriously. Just, food for thought. Don't think about it too hard. You notice a woman being led away in chains by a group of guards. She's accused of witchcraft, her eyes wide with fear. Witch hunts were a tragic reality, fueled by superstition and religious paranoia. It's a stark reminder of the dangers of ignorance and intolerance. Historians still debate the causes and extent of the witch hunts. Were they primarily driven by religious zealotry, or were there other factors at play, such as social tensions and economic anxieties? Whatever the reasons, the consequences were devastating for countless innocent people. You press on, determined to survive this little historical field trip. You just have to focus on putting one foot in front of the other, avoid any unnecessary risks, and try not to contract any incurable diseases. Oh, and maybe buy a big stick. You never know when it might come in handy. I hope you found this stroll through the seedier side of history vaguely amusing. It is quite the adventure, isn't it? A little stressful. A little unsettling. But undeniably fascinating. You should find a nice place to rest and get out of this weather. Alright, settle in, friend. Let's get comfy and chat about where you'd fit in if you happened to, say, stumble through a time portal and landed smack dab in ancient Rome. And by fit in, I mean, what rung of the societal ladder you'd be clinging to for dear life. Think of it as your Roman placement test, except the stakes are way higher than just getting into the right math class. So, imagine the humid Roman air hits you first, thick with the smell of, everything. Incense, sewage, roasting meat, you name it, it's all happening. The sounds assault you next, the bleating of sheep being herded through the streets, hawkers yelling about their wares, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the incessant buzzing of flies. Ah, paradise. Now, before you can even think about finding a decent gelato, spoiler alert, they didn't have gelato, you're already being sized up. Every Roman eye is a judgmental X-ray machine scanning your clothes, your demeanor, your very aura to figure out where you belong. And trust me, belonging was everything. It was your lifeline. Let's assume, for a moment, that you aren't immediately enslaved. That's a win. But even among the free folk, there was a staggering hierarchy. At the tippy top, you have the patricians. Think of them as the original 1%ers, the families who could trace their lineage back to the founding of Rome. Seriously, their family trees probably had actual roots reaching into the ground. They controlled pretty much everything, the Senate, the best land, the important religious positions. They were the gatekeepers to power and privilege. Now, if you happen to be wearing really, really nice clothes, perhaps you accidentally wore your great-grandmother's antique silk scarf on your little time travel trip, you might get a second glance. But unless you can casually drop a name like Cornelius or Emilius into conversation, you're probably not fooling anyone. Fun fact, Roman patricians often had praenomina, nomina, and cognomina, essentially a first, middle, and last name. Some even had ignomina, additional nicknames, often earned through military victories or other achievements. Imagine introducing yourself as, "Hey, I'm Marcus Tullius Cicero Africanus." Talk about a mouthful. And here's a quirky little tidbit. Some patrician families even kept pet peacocks. Why? Because peacocks were exotic, expensive, and showed off your wealth. It's like the Roman equivalent of having a diamond-encrusted poodle. You just know those peacocks were complete jerks, strutting around and squawking at the plebs. Moving down the ladder, we arrive at the plebeians. This was everyone else, the vast majority of Roman citizens. Farmers, merchants, artisans, shopkeepers, basically, anyone who wasn't born into a super-rich family. They had rights, sure, but they were often second-class citizens compared to the patricians. They could vote, but their votes often counted for less. They could own property, but it was usually less desirable land. They could serve in the army, but they were often used as cannon fodder. Okay, maybe not cannon fodder, since cannons hadn't been invented yet, but you get the idea. Their lives revolved around work, family, and trying to avoid getting crushed by the patricians' metaphorical, and sometimes literal, chariot wheels. Historians still argue whether the plebeians were deliberately oppressed by the patricians, or if it was simply a matter of ingrained social inequality. Was it malicious intent or just a really, really unfair system? The debate rages on. Now, let's say you're wearing sturdy sandals, a simple tunic, and look like you know your way around a marketplace. Maybe you even have a slightly suspicious-looking sack slung over your shoulder. Don't worry, we won't ask what's inside. Congratulations. You're probably a plebeian. Time to find a job and start haggling for the price of bread. Just try not to accidentally insult a senator's wife while you're at it. That could end badly. But even within the plebeian class, there were levels. A successful merchant or a skilled craftsman would have been much better off than a day laborer struggling to feed his family. And then there were the clients, or clients. These were plebeians who attached themselves to a wealthy patron, usually a patrician, in exchange for protection and support. It was a sort of feudal system in miniature. The patron would provide food, shelter, and legal assistance, while the client would offer loyalty, votes, and, well, whatever else the patron asked for. It could be a pretty sweet deal, but it also meant surrendering a lot of your independence. You might find yourself running errands at all hours, cheering enthusiastically at your patron's gladiatorial games, or even, shudder, laughing at his jokes. Alright, now for another historical tidbit. The cursus honorum was the sequential order of public offices held by aspiring Roman politicians. Basically, it was the career ladder you had to climb to reach the highest positions of power, like consul. You started with lower offices like quaestor, then aedile, then praetor, and finally, if you were lucky, and wealthy and well-connected, you could become consul. It was a long and grueling process, but it was the only way to make it to the top. And here's a fun fact: Roman houses didn't have street numbers. Instead, they were identified by the name of the owner or a prominent feature of the building. Imagine trying to give directions: go past the bakery, then turn left at the house with the giant mosaic of Neptune, and it's the one next to the guy who always sings opera at 3 a.m. No wonder everyone got lost all the time. Okay, maybe that wasn't that funny. I'll try harder next time. Then, below the plebeians, we have the freedmen, or liberti. These were former slaves who had been granted their freedom. They occupied a weird social space. They were no longer slaves, but they were still often looked down upon by the freeborn. They couldn't hold public office, and they often had to continue working for their former masters, at least for a while. But they had a chance to build a life for themselves, to start a business, to own property. It was a hard road, but it was a road to something better. Now, if you're wearing rags, are covered in dirt, and have a haunted look in your eyes, well, I'm sorry to say, you're probably a slave. And life as a slave in ancient Rome was, generally speaking, pretty terrible. You had no rights, you were considered property, and your life was entirely at the mercy of your owner. You could be forced to work in the fields, in the mines, in the kitchens, or even as a gladiator in the arena. Some slaves were treated relatively well, particularly those who worked as tutors or secretaries in wealthy households. But for most, life was a constant struggle for survival. It's estimated that slaves made up a significant portion of the Roman population. Some historians even put the figure as high as 30% or more. That's a lot of people living under incredibly harsh conditions. A key source of slaves was Roman military expansion. The Romans, being rather keen on conquering new territories, would often enslave the captured populations. Talk about a hostile takeover. And here's a grim little tidbit: some Roman slaves were forced to wear metal collars that identified them and offered a reward for their return if they ran away. Imagine wearing a dog collar, but instead of a cute little tag with your name on it, it's a constant reminder of your enslavement. Depressing, right? Historians still argue about the extent of slave resistance in ancient Rome. Did slaves passively accept their fate, or did they actively resist their oppressors? We know that slave revolts did happen, most famously the revolt led by Spartacus. But were these isolated incidents, or were they part of a broader pattern of resistance? The evidence is fragmented, and the debate continues. So, where do you fit in? Are you a patrician, sipping wine and dictating laws? A plebeian, hustling to make a living? A freedman, building a new life after slavery? Or, a slave, hoping for a better tomorrow? Well, hopefully, you're still here in the 21st century, enjoying the comforts of modern life. But it's worth remembering that even in a society as seemingly glamorous as ancient Rome, there were vast inequalities and stark differences in opportunity. And that, my friend, is something to think about. Alright, friend, let's dim those imaginary oil lamps and settle in. You've had a long day navigating the Forum, dodging chariot traffic, and trying to explain to your neighbor why you absolutely did not accidentally set his toga on fire during the neighborhood barbecue. It's time to unwind, Roman style. You trudge back to your domus, maybe a modest apartment above a shop if you're not rolling in denarii, or perhaps a sprawling villa on the outskirts of the city if you're really important. Either way, the first thing that hits you is the smell. Roman sanitation? Let's just say it wasn't exactly their strong suit. The scent of open sewers and whatever dubious perfumes are popular this week lingers in the air, a fragrant cocktail that could knock out a Gaul at 50 paces. You quickly shuffle inside, hoping tonight's special won't be served at supper. You pass the lararium, the little shrine to your household gods, and maybe offer a quick nod. Fortuna, goddess of luck, could use a little extra attention after you lost that dice game earlier. Seriously, did Quintus have to roll 3 6s in a row? Was he in cahoots with the gods, or just suspiciously lucky? You mutter a silent promise to sacrifice a slightly fatter chicken next week. Or maybe a pigeon. They're pretty much everywhere. After dinner, which hopefully wasn't too heavy on the garum, fermented fish sauce, the ketchup of ancient Rome, you start preparing for bed. Now, no Roman is going to just flop onto a mattress in their tunic and call it a night. There's a process, a ritual. First, you'd probably take a bath, if you're fortunate enough to have a private one. If not, it's off to the public baths, the thermae. Picture this: hundreds of sweaty Romans crammed into steamy rooms, gossiping about the latest gladiator match, occasionally scrubbing themselves with olive oil and a strigil, a curved metal scraper that basically exfoliates you down to your soul. It's an experience. And hopefully you don't mind public nudity, or the occasional questionable substance floating in the water. Romans weren't exactly shy about sharing their, well, everything. But tonight, let's assume you have a more private bathing situation. You pour lukewarm water into a basin, maybe add a few drops of rose oil if you're feeling fancy. Soap? Not really a thing. More like a mixture of clay and ash. It gets the job done, eventually. Historians still argue whether Romans truly understood the concept of germs as we do today, but they did recognize that cleanliness was important for general health, even if their methods were rustic. You emerge from your ablutions feeling marginally cleaner, which is honestly a victory in this era. Now, it's time to change into your tunica nocturna, your Roman pajamas. Essentially, it's just a looser, more comfortable tunic. Practical and stylish. You avoid wearing anything too flashy to bed, because let's be real, what if you die in your sleep and you're stuck wearing that forever in the afterlife? Eternal embarrassment is a fate worse than Cerberus. Now, the bed. Forget your plush memory foam mattress. You're looking at a straw-filled sack on top of a wooden frame. Maybe if you're really wealthy, you have a feather mattress. Lucky you. Sheets? Linen, probably. Blankets? Wool, most likely. Scratchy, itchy wool. Hope you don't have sensitive skin. Pillows? Optional. Romans weren't big on propping themselves up with fluffy clouds of down. A rolled-up piece of cloth would suffice. Or, your arm. Innovation. It has been said that Romans would only lay their heads flat to the bed in order to avoid wrinkles. Who needs sleep when you can defy aging? Before climbing into bed, you might consult the stars. Astrology was huge in ancient Rome. People believed their fates were written in the heavens, and consulting an astrologer was as common as checking the weather forecast is today. You might ask about your love life, your career prospects, or whether you should invest in that new olive oil press. Or maybe you'll consult a dream interpreter. Dreams were considered messages from the gods, so if you dreamed of being chased by a giant octopus, you'd need to know if Neptune was mad at you. Octopi were also not widely consumed, so it was rare to have one on your mind. Lighting is dim. Your lucerna, your oil lamp, casts flickering shadows across the walls. Romans didn't have electricity, obviously, so darkness was a constant companion. You adjust the wick, trying to get just the right amount of light without setting your straw mattress on fire. Safety first. Fire was a real concern in Roman cities, and entire neighborhoods could go up in flames in a matter of hours. You finally climb into bed. The straw rustles beneath you. It's not exactly the Ritz, but it's home. You pull the scratchy wool blanket up to your chin. Time to relax. You might read for a while. Scrolls were the books of the day, and reading by flickering lamplight was a cozy, if somewhat eye-strain-inducing, pastime. Poetry, history, philosophy, there was plenty to choose from. Maybe you will read a few lines of Virgil, and pretend to be Aeneas in your dreams. Or maybe you'll just admire some mildly erotic mosaics that the ancient equivalent of Playboy would feature. You could also listen to some music. Lyre, flute, maybe even a water organ, if your neighbor has one and feels like showing off. Music was a common form of entertainment, and Romans were quite fond of a good tune, even if their taste in melodies might sound a bit different to our modern ears. Another evening ritual might involve warding off evil spirits. Romans were a superstitious bunch, and they believed in all sorts of supernatural creatures, from household gods to vengeful ghosts. Amulets, spells, incantations, anything to keep those pesky spirits away. Some would even nail a phallic symbol to their doorway for good luck. Seriously. Romans were not shy about their, well, let's just say they were very comfortable with the human form. Now, as you drift off to sleep, imagine the sounds of ancient Rome. The distant roar of the city, the barking of dogs, the creaking of wooden carts, the occasional drunken reveler singing off-key. It's not exactly a peaceful lullaby, but it's the sound of your world. One last thought before sleep claims you. Historians still argue whether Romans brushed their teeth. Evidence suggests they used twigs, powders, and even urine to clean their pearly whites. Yes, urine. Apparently, the ammonia acted as a whitening agent. Sleep tight, and don't let the bedbugs, or the thought of Roman dental hygiene, bite. Okay, here we go. Let's dim the lights a little, shall we? Time to unwind and think about tomorrow. You trudge up the stairs, each step a little heavier than the last. Another day bites the dust. You kick off your shoes, thump, thump, and the sudden silence is almost deafening after the constant hum of the day. Socks off, too. Freedom. You wiggle your toes in the plush carpet, a small rebellion against the tyranny of footwear. Maybe you should start a revolution. Barefoot and fancy-free. I'd subscribe to that channel. The news is off, blessedly silent. You grab a glass of water, the cool liquid a welcome contrast to the lingering dryness in your throat. Dehydration, my friend, is the enemy. Did you know that humans can only survive for about 3 days without water? Seriously, look it up. Back in the Stone Age, I bet cavemen were always complaining about being thirsty. Historians still argue whether the development of agriculture was primarily driven by a desire for stable food sources or just a desperate need for reliable access to beer. Priorities, people. You pad into the bathroom, the cool tiles a shock to your still warm feet. You splash some water on your face, watching as the droplets cling to your eyelashes like tiny, shimmering jewels. Or, spider eggs. Don't think about that. Focus on the refreshing sensation. You gaze at your reflection. A little tired, maybe, but you made it. You survived another day. High five. You brush your teeth, the minty toothpaste a familiar comfort. You floss diligently, because you're a responsible adult, even if you sometimes eat cereal for dinner standing in front of the open fridge. Speaking of responsible adults, did you know that the ancient Egyptians used a form of toothpaste made from things like crushed pumice stone and oxen hooves? Imagine the flavor profile. Ox hooves and grit, at least it probably got the plaque off. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of ancient Egyptian dental hygiene. I bet their breath was amazing. You change into your pajamas, the soft cotton a gentle caress against your skin. Ah, pajamas. The official uniform of relaxation. You consider, for a fleeting moment, what Marie Antoinette would have worn to bed. Silk? Lace? A tiny, bejeweled nightcap? Probably all of the above. It was rumored she had a secret room dedicated entirely to shoes. That's the kind of dedication I can respect. Maybe I need a shoe room. Nah, I'd just fill it with books. Although, shoe-shaped books. Historians still argue about the true extent of Marie Antoinette's extravagance. Probably because the evidence got lost amongst all the shoes. You wander into your bedroom, the soft glow of the bedside lamp casting long, dancing shadows across the walls. You plump up your pillows, arranging them just so. You like to sleep with two pillows. One for your head, one for your existential dread. You climb into bed, pulling the covers up to your chin. Snug as a bug. A bug in a rug. A bug in a clean rug, I hope. You grab your book, the familiar weight comforting in your hands. You read a few pages, the words blurring slightly as your eyelids grow heavy. You know, the printing press really revolutionized the world. Gutenberg, you're a legend. Before that, people had to transcribe everything by hand. I can barely manage to write a grocery list. Imagine copying War and Peace. No thank you. There's a rumor that Gutenberg sold his invention to a demon in exchange for fame and fortune. Which, you know, seems like a pretty fair trade, honestly. Historians still argue about the true extent of Gutenberg's financial success. Maybe he just should have launched a Patreon. You set the book aside, the words fading into the background as your thoughts begin to drift. You think about the day, the things you accomplished, the things you didn't. It's okay. Tomorrow is a fresh start. A blank canvas. You can paint it whatever color you want. As long as it's not beige. Beige is the enemy of dreams. You close your eyes, focusing on your breathing. Inhale, exhale, in, out. You can hear the gentle hum of the refrigerator in the distance, a low, comforting drone. Maybe it's singing you a lullaby. Maybe it's plotting to take over the world. Either way, it's kind of soothing. You let your mind wander, drifting through a landscape of half-formed thoughts and fleeting images. A beach bathed in golden sunlight, a field of wildflowers swaying in the breeze, a giant, fluffy cloud shaped like a potato. Okay, that was random. Sorry. You think about your dreams, the things you want to achieve, the person you want to become. Don't be afraid to dream big. Even if your dreams seem impossible, reach for them anyway. You never know what you might catch. And if you don't catch anything, at least you got some exercise. You remember that silly joke you heard earlier today and you almost smile. It was about a... No, I can't remember. Never mind. You feel yourself drifting further and further away, sinking into the soft embrace of sleep. Your muscles relax, your breathing deepens, your mind grows still. You are safe. You are warm. You are loved. Or at least, liked a lot. I like you. You seem nice. And now, as the day fades completely into memory, let your thoughts soften like the edges of clouds. Your mind is a quiet, still pool, reflecting the stars. Feel the gentle rhythm of your breath, the steady beat of your heart, the calm that settles over you like a soft blanket. Imagine yourself floating, drifting on a sea of calm. No worries, no anxieties, just the gentle rocking of the waves. The world outside fades away, replaced by a sense of peace and tranquility. Let go of the day, its triumphs and its challenges. They are done. They are past. Now is the time for rest, for renewal, for dreaming. Sleep soundly, my friend. Recharge your batteries. Prepare for a new day, a new adventure, a new opportunity to shine. May your dreams be sweet, and your tomorrow even sweeter. Good night.